Welcome back to JavaScript The Basics. In this lesson, we're going to continue our primer on functional programming. We're going to look at the map method. Before we get into the practicals, let's shed a little more light on the vocab of pure functions we have used a few times so far. A function is only pure if given the same input, it will always produce the same output. Let's look at an example. Math.random. Every time our JavaScript interpreter runs this method, we will get a different result. Given the same input, we cannot expect the same output. Even though we didn't pass any arguments into any of the function calls, they all produced a different output, meaning that math.random is not pure. Math.random produces a new random number between 0 and 1 every time you run it. When we ask the computer for a random number, it usually means that we want a different result than we got the last time. The math.random method has its place, but this is an example of a function that, given the same input, does not return the same output. Let's continue to look at higher order functions. Let's continue by looking at a higher order function named map. Remember, in JavaScript, functions are just like values. Like any other value in JavaScript, we can take advantage of this by passing functions as arguments to functions. Make sure that starts to sink in with you. We can go ahead and start with map. The map method will be attached to an array, just like filter was in our last lesson. We will then pass it a function as an argument. Remember, that is what makes filter, map, and reduce higher order functions, passing a function to a function. Every element on our original array will interact with this callback function and result in a new array. While filter threw away some of the items of an array, map transforms all of the items and returns them to a new array. Let's go ahead and look at a similar array to our last lab. We'll look at days of the week and a boolean of true or false in regards to whether there's going to be sun, and then we'll also add humidity with a number value. In our previous lab, we used filter to only return days in which there would be sunshine. With map, we're going to return an array that works on every element in our array. Remember, each element in our array is actually an object separated by commas. We're going to transform this array by having the map method work through each element of our array and create a new array by returning the humidity value. We aren't rejecting anything on a true or false value as with filter. But before we do this, let's do it with the more difficult for loop. First, we'll declare a new variable that will contain our array called humid. We'll initialize this array with 2 empty square brackets. Then we'll make our for loop. Hopefully this is becoming very second nature to know that there are 3 statements that will go in your for loop. Statement 1 is the initialization of the counter, var I equals 0. Statement 2 is the test condition that the counter is less than the array length of forecast. Then our third statement is the update of our counter that we will use once we have gone through our code block if the test condition was true. In our code block, we simply name our new array we created, humid, then we do the push method on this array because we are going to want to add values into our new array. Within the push parentheses, we'll place our argument. It is the forecast array at the current counter index. In this case, it is the object with the key value pairs of day Monday, sun true, and humidity 10. Within that object, we put .humidity, which means that we are trying to access the value of the property humidity. And that is what we are pushing into our new array. As we go through all of the values of our current array, and we push them into our new array, we find that humid will return an array filled with values of 10, 100, 100, 25, 100, 15, and 100. This would lead you to believe that you'll probably want to keep an umbrella somewhere near you for the rest of the week. Now, how do we do this with the higher order function map? We will declare a variable called humid. This will be our array. Notice how with the for loop, you had to initialize a new array and assign it to the variable in an earlier step. Not in this case. Map knows that you are going to create an array. Var humid is assigned the value of our forecast array. We will then attach the map method. We will pass a function to map. This is a callback function that will be passed each element in our forecast array. We'll give the function an argument of the current value for each element to use as it goes through each element in the array. Since we have already used the word humidity for a property in our forecast array, and humid for the name of our new array, we'll use the word wetness to capture how saturated the air is. We also could have just used the word x. It doesn't matter. Just as long as it matches what we're going to use in our code block that we enter into. We're going to return wetness, the current element in the array, with the property value of humidity. And that is it. Faster, right? Every time you use a map instead of a for loop, you add about 15 seconds to your life. And hopefully, you'll see it creates less opportunities to write the wrong code. Let's go ahead and look at one more example using map. This won't be anything different than what we have already done, but hopefully reinforce some of the syntax and language for you. Let's use it on an array of numbers. Let's imagine that we want to multiply all of our numbers by 3. We'll declare our array that is going to collect all of our transformed elements that have gone through the map method. We'll assign it the value of our numbers array. On the numbers array, we will use the map method. And because the map method is a higher order function, it means that we can pass it a function, because functions are a value in JavaScript, and values can be passed around in JavaScript. Map is going to go through each element in our array. Our current value is represented by the argument num. Each element in our array, represented by the current value num, will be multiplied by 3. This will transform every element in our array. Again, this is different than filter that deletes values that don't evaluate to true. This passes all of the elements in a transformed state. Our triples array now has a value of 15, 30, 45, 60, and 75. Alright, thanks for joining me in this first look at maps. I'll see you in the lab where we begin to put what we have learned into practice.